Welcome back, Night Owls. This is Dr. Nighttime, and Happy Hanukkah, everybody! Ma'osur Yeshuati lechana el shabeach tikon betefilati v'sham toda nezaveach le. Okay, you didn't come here to hear me sing. You came here to hear me talk about something math-related. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe the mathematical reasons as to why it is that Hanukkah cannot start on a Tuesday. Now, for clarification, what do we mean by that? As you may or may not be aware, Jewish days roll over starting to the next day in the evening. With most calendars, the actual daytime when the sun is shining is all considered one solid day, and the question becomes, well, when do you have the cutoff to go from one day to the next day? With the Gregorian calendar, we essentially just use rounding, right? You look however deep into the night, and if you're closer to the previous shining sun daytime, then you're the previous day, and if you're after midnight, and thus closer to the next shining sun daytime, it's the next day, approximately. And 12 midnight is approximately that cutoff. On the Jewish calendar, instead, sunset is used as the cutoff, for the most part. There is a brief, approximately 45-minute period between sunset and when it would be dark enough to see stars without cloud cover or light pollution. And those 45-ish minutes, if there are any restrictions or requirements based on one day or the other day, then you go with whatever's more stringent. But for the most part, sunset is the cutoff. So when I say Tuesday, I'm referring to Monday evening after sunset or Tuesday before sunset. Anyway, this still prompts the question, well, why can't Hanukkah start on a Tuesday? Right? It's a little unusual to have a calendar where certain events can't actually happen on certain days of the week. But let's take a look at a typical Jewish calendar. My apologies about the poor quality on here. It's surprisingly difficult to find a fully tabulated Jewish calendar that is not overlaid on top of a Gregorian calendar and actually segments everything by the Jewish months. And this was the best quality I could easily find. Anyway, typical calendar year, Jewish calendar year starts with the month of Tishrei. Technical note, different versions of the years can actually start on different months, similar to how, with the Gregorian calendar, right? The year starts with January, but if you talk about the academic year, that may start in August or September, depending on your jurisdiction. If you talk about the fiscal year, that typically starts, I think, in October, right? Jewish calendar has some versions of this. Is the main one where we talk about when does the year start. And I got a couple days highlighted here. This blue, first day of the first month, that's Rosh Hashanah, that's the new year. And this orange one over here, 25th of Kislev, is first day of Hanukkah. Alright? So there are actually restrictions placed on when Tishrei, and thus the year, can start. Some history behind that. Way back, the calendar wasn't determined in advance, and you would actually start each month by waiting for people to actually see the new moon. It would often look like this. You probably check in the evening, right, if you're expecting it, right, if you want to say, okay, did the new moon happen yet? You'd have to go out and look and see if it's the new month. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, mostly lunar calendar, where each month actually represents a lunar cycle. It begins with the new moon, full moon is in the middle, and ends with the smallest waning crescent moon. So you wait for people to actually see something like this, and people saw it, they would go to the courthouse. There was a series of interview questions just to make sure that they saw the right thing, and to keep them honest. I don't know the full list of questions, but some of the questions they would ask was, if it was in the evening, they'd ask, okay, was the moon in the east part of the sky or the west part of the sky? And novices might assume, okay, the moon's going to be opposite the sun, so if it's in the evening, the sun's going to be in the west, so the moon's got to be in the east, and may answer incorrectly when, no, the way that lunar cycles work, the reason why we barely see any of the moon is because it's backlit, which means it's got to be close to where the sun is when viewed in the sky. So you'd have to say, oh, yeah, the moon is in the west half of the sky. They might ask, which is closer to the horizon? The moon should be closer to the horizon because it's leading the sun. If you see something like this, except the moon is further from the horizon, you're actually looking at the last day of the previous month, not the first day of the next month. And so they'd have to know, oh, it's not the new month yet. Wait another day. Another question they would ask is, with this curved shape of the moon, describe how that curve was positioned relative to the sun. They'd have to say, this curved end is kind of pointing outward towards the sun. If they said it was kind of cupping the sun, then they're either lying or saw something else. Not sure what else that would be, but wasn't the new moon. But anyway, people would have to actually see the moon. So if it were particularly cloudy one day, or if they didn't see it in time, right, the month may start a day late. And so they realize it's okay to start the calendar a day late, but you're not allowed to start the calendar a day early. All right. Well, I would say allowed to, right? Well, what would the motivation be of starting the calendar on the wrong day? Let's take another look at this calendar. I have some days circled in red here. This one here is Yom Kippur. Now, Yom Kippur starts with a ceremony, or shortly before Yom Kippur, starts with a ceremony that involved lighting a flame. Now, you're not actually allowed to light a flame on Yom Kippur itself, so that's why you do it a little bit before. Now, here on this particular year we had, Yom Kippur fell on the Sabbath. The Sabbath, that's Saturday, also began with lighting a flame. Okay, so you light that flame a little bit before sunset on Friday evening. And that's fine, unless Yom Kippur were to fall on a Friday or a Sunday. Because in that case, whichever of those 2 days comes later, you can't light the flame early. Because it's now another day where lighting the flame is forbidden. Also, on those days, and only the Sabbath and Yom Kippur, are you forbidden from transferring from an existing flame. Because while there are other holidays where you can't light a new flame, you can transfer from an existing flame. And so if one of those starts on a Sunday or ends on a Friday evening, it's traditional to light a really, really big candle that's going to last more than a full day. And then when it comes time to light the flame that you're supposed to light, you take a match, and instead of striking the match, you just hold it to the existing flame and transfer that flame onto the candle that you're supposed to be lighting. But either way, this day here is not allowed to fall on a Friday or a Sunday. This essentially means Rosh Hashanah itself here can't fall on a Wednesday or a Friday. And then this holiday right here, Hoshana Rabbah, that included a ceremony that involved striking willow leaves against the ground until the leaves fall off, which is an activity you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, on Saturday. So they didn't want this holiday falling on a Saturday either. If you count the days, that means Rosh Hashanah cannot begin on a Sunday. So Rosh Hashanah cannot begin on a Sunday, a Wednesday, or a Friday. Okay. So you look at this calendar, you notice that Hanukkah starts on the weekday before Rosh Hashanah. So if Hanukkah were to start on a Tuesday, that means that Rosh Hashanah would have to start on a Wednesday, which it can't do. Simple, right? There's more to it than that. See, here I say the typical calendar. The calendar does not always look like this. Sometimes the calendar looks more like this. Now, there are two differences between this calendar and the one I just showed you. Feel free to pause and look back, and one of them is really easy to spot, one of them is a lot harder. Alright, the first thing you probably noticed is that this calendar has 13 months in it. Something else you may or may not have noticed was that on this calendar, this third month has 29 days in it. Whereas, in this calendar, that same third month has 30 days in it. Not expecting any of you to have just randomly noticed that specifically. I said that one of the differences was going to be harder to spot. And so why is that? Well, let's go into it. So if you add up the number of days across this typical calendar, notice that the months alternate between having 30 days and 29. 30, 29, 30, 29. You end up with 354 days. That's less than the actual length of a year, 365 days. So if you do this, the holidays would keep getting earlier and earlier. But there's a problem. Passover, here, must fall during the spring. And so to fix that, 7 times out of every 19 years, we just add in an additional month. You may notice here we have Adar 1 and Adar 2. This Adar 1 has 30 days. This second Adar only has 29. Adar normally has 29 days, but we're adding in these extra 30 days to try to extend the year out a bit, and then it'll creep back, and a couple years later you extend it out again. Okay, Dr. Nighttime, what does that have to do with anything? We're talking about timing between Tishrei, 1st of Tishrei when Rosh Hashanah is, and 25th of Kislev. How does that have any... Adding in something here isn't going to mess with anything. Well, bear with me. We'll bring that up later. Just bear in mind there are 2 noticeably different ways that the calendar could look. And then you've got this thing about 29 or 30 days in Kislev. And there's actually, I perhaps should have found a different calendar from a different year that showed this, but Cheshvan itself sometimes has 29 days and sometimes has 30. And that's actually where Hanukkah can start to get messed with. Okay, so what's the deal with these? Well, if we're worried about trying to avoid certain holidays landing on certain days of the week, this is actually the tool we use to do that. Of either taking away a day from the year or adding an extra day to the year to make the holidays fall a day later or earlier. And essentially, if the holiday is falling on a problematic day, you just extend that year a day to push everything later, and then you can shortchange a year later, right, to send everything back. Because remember, you're allowed to start the year late, you just can't start the year early. All right. There actually is another reason why we may need to specifically make Cheshvan 30 days instead of 29. Or why we need to add in an extra day sometimes. The length of a lunar cycle is not exactly 29 days, 12 hours, right? You notice these alternating 30 and 29 day months. It's actually 29 days, 12 hours, and about 45 minutes. And those 45 minutes, month after month, start to add up, right? Over the course of a year, that's about 9 extra hours. Over the course of, 3 years, you'd have to add in an extra day. And this is where that extra day would go. All right. So regardless of whether it's a leap year or not, if you don't add in the extra day to Cheshvan, notice that adding in an extra, or removing the day from Kislev has nothing to do with when Hanukkah starts, right? It starts on the 25th of Kislev. Whether Kislev has 29 or 30 days is irrelevant for that purpose. As long as you have a normal 29-day Cheshvan, if Hanukkah were to start on a Tuesday, then Rosh Hashanah would be starting on a Wednesday, which, as we said, can't happen. Alright, what if you do put in an extra day of Cheshvan? Well, let's take a look back at a typical calendar and say, what if this month had an extra day in it? And it pushed everything else over a day. Hanukkah would start a day later, right? But what if you did that and Tishrei started on a Tuesday, forcing Hanukkah to start on a Tuesday, right? Hanukkah normally starts a weekday earlier than Rosh Hashanah, but if you're adding in the extra day in Cheshvan, okay, it starts on a Tuesday. What happens if you propagate out through the rest of the year? Remember, the calendar shown here has Rosh Hashanah starting on Thursday. So the last day of Elul, if Rosh Hashanah started on Tuesday, the last day of Elul would be a Friday. But if you're adding the extra day, it would push this to a Saturday. And that means the following year, Rosh Hashanah would start on a Sunday. And this Hoshana Rabbah would start on Shabbat, on Saturday, when it's not allowed to start. Okay, so in a typical non-leap year, if Hanukkah were to start on Tuesday, if it weren't an extended year, right, with that extra day, then that would mean Rosh Hashanah would have needed to start on a Wednesday, which you can't do. And if it were, then you'd have problems with the next Rosh Hashanah. Okay. What if it is a leap year? Fun fact, in Hebrew, the phrase for leap year doesn't have anything to do with jumping. The phrase for leap year literally translates to pregnant year. Because the year is a little bit bigger than it normally is, and it's got this extra bump. Anyway, so during a leap year, what would happen if Tishrei were to start on a Tuesday, right? Rosh Hashanah would be a Tuesday. And if you have an extended Cheshvan, which you'll notice here you don't, but some years you do. If you have an extended Cheshvan and a full 30-day Kislev, if you count it out, the year would be a full 55 weeks long. You would have Rosh Hashanah starting on a Tuesday. Hanukkah would be starting on a Tuesday in that situation. And the following Rosh Hashanah would be starting on a Tuesday. Okay. Nothing's wrong with that, right? So why does it never happen? Because in that situation of, it's a leap year, and it's starting on a Tuesday, there is never any reason to make Cheshvan 30 days rather than 29. Remember the two reasons for extending a year. Either correcting for days of the week problems, right? But Rosh Hashanah can start on a Monday just fine. The days to avoid are Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. So that's not it. The other reason would be if, because of the lunar cycle being a little bit more than 29 and a half days, that you might need to add in an extra day to account for those extra 45 minutes per month that keep accruing. Okay. So why doesn't that ever need to happen? And it's because this additional month has 30 days in it. A lunar cycle is approximately 29 days, 12 hours-ish. So you're already gaining close to 12 extra hours just from having a 30-day month for a 29 and a half day lunar cycle. And you're not adding an additional 29-day month in to remove those hours. You've got those extra almost 12 hours. So the fact that you're losing 9 hours over the rest of the calendar doesn't matter. If the true starting date for Tishrei, for the full year, was on a Tuesday, then there would never be a need to, if you were to start it later, right? You might actually be already starting it a day late, right? Because of those couple extra hours, but you wouldn't be starting it early, so you wouldn't need that extra day. So, to recap, regardless of whether it's a leap year or not, if Cheshvan is its standard length, then Hanukkah cannot start on a Tuesday, or else it would have meant that Rosh Hashanah would have started on a Wednesday. If you do extend Cheshvan, and it's not a leap year, then the following Rosh Hashanah would start on a Sunday, which it's not allowed to do, and in a leap year, there would never be any reason to extend the year, assuming it started on a Tuesday, right? There are other times when you'll do that, right? If the year started on a Thursday, and without the extension, the next year would start on a Wednesday, right? That can't happen, so you might add in an extra day and have a full 55-week year then. But if it starts on a Tuesday, there's never any reason to have a 30-day Cheshvan, and so Hanukkah would be starting on a Monday rather than Tuesday. I hope you found this interesting. Until next time, this is Dr. Nighttime wishing you a good night.